Better late than never. Alright, kicking things off is Batman 110. I'm not sure about Batman 110. We're on the penultimate issue of the Cowardly Lot storyline that's intended to set us off on this big Fear State event. We've got the Magistrate coming into effect in Gotham. They're going after the Unsanity Collective. Batman barely holds his own against Peacekeeper 1. It just feels like there's too much going on. It's hard to really invest in anything. I know I've said this in prior months as well, but I really felt it here because this is where things are should be starting to ramp up. But it's it's just going a little too far. I think the storyline that set up Joker War was I want to say 9 or 10 issues, and that was already a lot to take in. And trying to do this whole setup in 6, I mean, this is literally you could do 12 issues building all these characters up and setting yourself up for Fear State. But instead, we got to get to the big event, and so it's all crammed into 6 issues here. It's funny because with Tom King, we had, just the never-ending, snail pace. And with Tinian, it's kind of the opposite. I do feel like that's probably editorial mandate to a certain degree. But regardless, doesn't really matter whose fault it is. Batman 110 for me just didn't really click on all cylinders. I was supposed to be getting more and more excited, and it just didn't do much for me. So last month, Batman The Adventures Continue was kind of a really pleasant surprise for me. And the question is, do the adventures continue to be a pleasant surprise? And I will definitely say yes. So we get the second half of Court Fight, which is Batman and Deadman versus the Court of Owls. We get kind of a big twist, spoilers, which is that the mayor who was killed in the first issue is actually a member of the Court of Owls, and so he makes a comeback, which is kind of a fun development for that character. First half of the issue, I was a little bit lukewarm on. There's a lot of kind of jokey stuff going on with Deadman, a lot of one-liners that just for me didn't really land. But as the story progressed and you got to see where it was going, got to see what was going on with the mayor, and then some interesting beats with the mayor's son, overall I thought this was a pretty satisfying conclusion of this storyline, and I'm excited to see where we go from here. Alright, next up, I read Batman the Detective. This was going to be the issue that kind of makes or breaks it for me, because we kind of got through the mid-cycle slump, and now we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes, which this issue does deliver on that. It does feel like it's reaching a conclusion. We are headed towards the finish line for sure. That said, I'm out of gas on this one. I think, the art continues to be fantastic. I mean, as we leaf through it, you can just see... But there are just some weird gaps in logic in the storytelling on this. Bruce Wayne is confronted by the people he's going after, and they think he might be Batman, and they kind of have this contrivance that makes them dismiss it. And I don't know, it just rang really flat. And then Batman has to make his escape. He's been poisoned, and he gets, actually it's right here, he just breaks the chains because he's Batman. And just a lot of weird things that just sort of cause them to further the story. I feel like, this is probably a 3-issue miniseries that got extended into 6 issues. And, it may finish strong, but there's just not enough going on in this. And the storytelling in this, as we kind of are getting back on track, just got really hokey to me. So I will finish this out, let you guys know how it wraps up. But all told, this is officially the first DC Tom Taylor dud for me. So, sorry to say it. So if you were looking for a miniseries about Batman to invest in, Batman Reptilian, definitely the way to go. This feels so fresh. I love how Garth Ennis is writing Batman in this. Just a super heightened, cynical version of Batman who is already cynical. Not a lot happens in this in terms of the story. Like, he continues to pull at threads, and you're starting to get a sense of, him closing in on this reptilian villain that he's encountered. But to be honest, the thing that really carries the story for me on this is the art and the dialogue. So, I mean, as we're leafing through, like, you can see, like, just such atmospheric artwork, super fun to pour over and just really sink your teeth into. And then there's also just great dialogue and characterization to support you all the way through it. You just get sucked into the atmosphere, and it carries you through the book. So if you didn't pick up issue 1, go check it out. Come back, get issue 2. This is definitely a strong recommend for me again this month, after a great first showing last month. So you might be one of those people out there that are thinking, there is not enough Batman books month to month. Well, I've got amazing news for you. Batman Secret Files, a new series of one-shots from DC, aiming to look at some of Batman's supporting characters. This month we got Huntress and the Signal, is here to deliver for you. So these are the kind of stories that you wouldn't be able to get in Batman Urban Legends. You couldn't get them in a backup story in Batman, Detective Comics, the Joker. You had to get them here in these one-shots. So in all seriousness, this is the kind of thing, I would never buy these books normally, but I'm reading and reviewing everything Batman, so I decided, why not? Let's give them a shot. We'll start off with The Signal, which features Duke, I can't remember his last name, but this character was introduced by Scott Snyder. I remember when he came in, and then I lost track of him until now. So I was actually kind of curious to read this one just to get a sense of where this character's at, what's happened with him over the last couple of years since I paid any attention to him. And for the most part, I guess I understood what was going on. This definitely relies pretty heavily on the I Am Robin series that ran, which I have a few of those issues, but I actually haven't read them. I can't say that this title necessarily made me want to go back and read them, but so it goes. Overall, the art in this was pretty generic. The coloring in it was pretty run-of-the-mill. Honestly, this felt like a tie-in issue for like a movie that was coming out. Like, that was just kind of the general quality level I got from it. And oddly enough, it actually ended on a cliffhanger, which seemed weird considering this is supposed to be a one-shot. So I don't know where this is going to be continuing. Overall, I'm not going to recommend The Signal. I thought it was a slog to get through. As a matter of fact, it actually took me 2 tries. I read like 5 pages, put it down, and then went away for a couple hours and then started over again. The Huntress story, on the other hand, I would say was a little bit better. So first of all, we've got Mariko Tamaki and David Lapham on art and writing, which is good. I like what Mariko Tamaki is doing with Huntress and Detective Comics right now. This is an extension of that, so I haven't reviewed this month's Detective Comics issues yet. That'll be later in the video, but know that there are spoilers for that in this book. So it's kind of works as an interquel between Detective Comics 1039 and upcoming Detective Comics 1041. With Huntress no longer in the backup stories, this is sort of a opportunity. I don't know if these were, I almost wonder if this was originally supposed to be told in a backup story, but it was just a little too long, because I don't know where you would have broken this story if you were to break it up into like 2 or 3 parts. Like, it didn't really work like that. But it was kind of nice to get it. This one I did not mind. And if you're reading Detective Comics, this might actually be one that's worth a pickup. It's got quality art, it's got good writing, and it ties into detective. So maybe worth it. I don't know. Your mileage may vary on this. For the most part, I would say take it or leave it, but I was actually kind of glad I got this one. Speaking of a glut of Batman books, Batman Urban Legends, of course, still floating around. We're on issue 5 now. Issue 4 really impressed me. It was one of my picks of the month last month. The question is, can it continue to deliver on that level of quality? And while I'll say that overall, I think 4 was a stronger issue. It had a stronger cover. It had stronger supporting stories. This was not a bad outing either. Largely because of the 2 longer storylines they have going on, Red Hood and Batman and Cheer, part 5 of 6. This one, I wasn't sold on it when it started. Now I'm really excited to see how everything wraps up and then read it all together when it's finished. I've really enjoyed uh, flashing back and forth between Jason Todd as Robin, Jason Todd as Red Hood, and really seeing them expand their relationship. Um, Really good stuff. It's actually, Chip Zdarsky really sold me on this, despite me really not being very interested at the beginning. And then the other main story, which is actually on its conclusion, Grifter and the Long Con. This has been a favorite of mine every single month. One of the main reasons I've been willing to continue slogging through Batman Urban Legends. Sadly, it's coming to a conclusion this month, but I will say what a conclusion it was. So I really don't think it's a spoiler to say that this is all building up to the return of the Wildcats to the DC universe. And, I've never cared much about the Wildcats, and I have never been more excited to get into them based on the strengths of this story. I really can't wait to see them do more with it. Really great story arc overall. Lucius Fox's portrayal in this also really stand out. Yeah, he's kind of the guy who really sees through what Cole Cash is really up to. And even at the end, though, it's like a triple double cross too many, and everybody's just like, what just happened? So, can't wait to see more from Wildcats. Obviously, I won't be reviewing as part of this since Wildcats aren't really part of the Batman line of books, but I will be checking that out in trade when that comes out eventually. It's going to be a long wait, but I am excited for it. So as I said, those two stories really carry you through the book. The middle two stories, in this case we have a Batgirl story and Wildcard, and Tim Drake story, part 2 of 3, some of our parts, were just fine. The Tim Drake story I think is interesting. It's nice to see Tim Drake back. He's an interesting character. They're trying to give him an interesting direction to go in. I'm on board with it. No real concerns there. Just also nothing particularly standout or special. Batgirls, for me, was really a bust. Primarily because I really just don't care for the way Cassandra Cain and Spoiler are portrayed these days. I think Spoiler's more or less fine. They've really modernized her personality, but overall, she's kind of in the vein, at least I feel like. But Cassandra Cain, I feel like they've really done a disservice. She's just nothing like the Cassandra Cain that everybody kind of fell in love with back in the day. And I felt like they had a good direction for her, so there's really no reason to reinvent her character other than to just try to appeal to a different demographic, which, not too into that. I neglected to mention it in the Signal review, but she makes an appearance there. And very similar complaint. Actually, to add insult to injury, there's even commentary about how, like, the Signal is an unstoppable machine, and he's so good at martial arts, like no one can beat him, and it's like in reference to Cassandra Cain, which it's like that was Cassandra Cain's whole thing. Like, she could take on Batman. Like, that was a major component of her character. And so to see them kind of throw that out, give it to another character, obviously you're going to have that in a huge comic book universe over 20-30 years, but that was just so distinctly Cassandra Cain. Like, she was a killing machine that they had to hold back. And so trying to, like, give that to the Signal, who's kind of a dope compared to her, and then just completely nerf her character is a little bit unforgivable. So that's what makes this issue probably not as good as last month's. But again, all told, Urban Legends for the Red Hood story and the Cheer story really is worth the pickup now, despite my earlier gripes about this book. All right, so here's a question. When was the last time I told you guys I love Ram V's Catwoman? Because guess what? You're hearing it again. Last month, we had kind of a little bit of a pause where we explored Catwoman's back history. We explored Valley's back history. And now we are getting back on to the main event. So we had an explosion in Alleytown. The Magistrate has everything on lockdown, and in a lot of ways, this is intersecting with what's going on in Detective Comics in the main Batman title. However, it is not dependent on that. I think that if you're not reading those, like really understanding like what the Magistrate is and what the Mayer is up to. I would be curious to know if you can follow it or if it's too obtuse, but I think that Ram V does a good job of bringing it in, not over explaining and not under explaining. And the story itself does definitely hold on its own. So, really good stuff. If this book had a downside, I would say this month I was a little disappointed in that we get kind of a different rogues gallery than what we've been looking at. Not that this isn't a fun group, like you got, Killer Croc, Firefly, Cheshire, you've got Basil Carlo, Clayface. The problem is we've spent all this time building up Riddler, building up Ivy, and I kind of wanted to see them incorporated here. But that's kind of a minor quibble because they do a good job with the characters that are here. So it was still fun. Basil Carlo is particularly good in this, I think. And I'm going to get into spoilers because it's kind of hard not to, because the thing that really drove this book over the edge was the cliffhanger. So towards the end, we finally get an opening battle between Valley and Catwoman. It does not go well for her. She basically barely escapes with her life. And as she's drowning, Batman finally re-enters the story with Catwoman. So really, really excited to see what is coming next in issue 34. I think this time away from Batman has been really earned. Ram V has done a really good job of utilizing that time, and I'm excited to see how Batman is brought back into this. I'm sure it will only be brief and we'll get back to just regular Catwoman, but I am excited to see, now that their characters have spent some time developing apart for the past couple years, I'm really curious to see what this interlude with Batman is going to look like. So, huge thumbs up for Catwoman. Go pick it up if you're not picking it up. This is one of my favorite books every single month. Okay, once again, double shipping this month. We've got Detective Comics 1039 and 1040. First of all, I'm just going to say I'm not going to say much about the backup stories in this. I've already kind of stopped talking about the main Batman backup story because I just need to go back and reread the whole thing when it's finished. The one thing I will say about them is this is the first set of backup stories where Mariko Tamaki is not the lead writer on it. So you get some backstory on Vile. You get a short story with Man-Bat kind of tying into some stuff going on with Justice League, which I'm not currently reading. They were fine, but Mariko Tamaki was definitely missed because Detective Comics was the place where I felt like they were really nailing the idea of a good backup story, and these just kind of felt more run-of-the-mill DC, $1 filler pages more than anything else. So with 1039, we get the conclusion of this Vile storyline where this parasite has latched itself on, and we get a full sense of who this character is, what he's all about, and what he's been doing in Gotham this whole time. Solid payoff. I thought it was a good story. If anything, it ended kind of abruptly, but there's an asterisk to that because it semi-continues in 1040. So I've been complaining a lot about how the main Batman story, there's just too much going on at once. And when Detective started, I had the same complaint. But I feel like Mariko Tamaki has done a much better job in focusing the story. Everything's kind of built to this head between Worth and Huntress and Batman and Vile and the police, them wanting Bruce Wayne in jail, all this kind of stuff. Really led to an exciting conclusion that felt like it wrapped up in a meaningful way. At the end of this, spoilers, Bruce Wayne basically turns himself back in, knowing that he's going to be better off doing that, and basically getting his name cleared, which leaves 1040 basically as a filler issue. But of the two, I really, really liked this read because it's really mostly just him sitting in jail and having a conversation with basically this guy who's standing next to him who's drunk. And we get this great callback to Steve Englehart Detective Comics, which was really great. Obviously a classic Detective Comics run. And you find out another aspect of this story that ties into this guy who's in the drunk take with Bruce Wayne. And I don't want to spoil it because I thought it was kind of a great little moment. Very good character development. But before we get back into the main story, which is you find out Vile is still alive, and the events of this last story arc are building up to a new crime alliance involving Worth, Penguin, and now Vile, who they see as their ticket to take things to the next level. So overall, this was a great story. I really enjoyed it, and Tamaki just killing it on Detective Comics, I gotta say. Another title that surprised me last month was Harley Quinn. I found that the art was improving, and it felt like the story was kind of starting to get a move on. And that trend actually continues with issue 5. So we kick things off with yet another Steve Englehart reference, which is kind of fun. You've got Hugo Strange dressing up as Batman. Kind of interesting that we get 2 of those sort of Englehart era references in 1 month. But then you get into Harley Quinn and Hugo Strange. And it's her kind of psychoanalyzing him while he's just kind of devolving into a brute villain, more or less. He's trying to psychoanalyze her, but she kind of gets the best of him. And then we have this great moment where she mounts her escape in kind of this kooky way that's actually funny. I think that part of what makes Harley Quinn fun as a character is seeing how she reacts to these types of situations and moves forward from it. I think seeing her in her element, which is kind of how the story started, was her kind of being proactive and going out and getting the bad guys. It just doesn't work as well as seeing her react to situations that she's been trapped in. Maybe that's the key to why I haven't liked this up to this point, but it started to grow on me. So either way, though, I'm happy to say Harley Quinn is more of a recommend for me now that it has been. If you weren't on board before, I don't know that now is the time to hop on, but we'll see. Maybe with the start of the next arc, it'll go somewhere that is worth hopping on board for. We'll see. All right, moving forward, we've got Joker number 5, which I'm curious what's going to happen with this. If Tinian is leaving for Substack, is this series going to continue, or is this going to wrap up, or what is the plan? I'm really curious. But as for issue 5, we've got basically a filler issue here. Art by Francisco Francavilla with his awesome limited use of color. Really quality stuff on the art here. No big surprise. I mean, Francavilla is so consistent. And the filler story is actually quite good. So basically it's a flashback to the early days. Definitely a situation where they're kind of harkening back to like Batman Year One. In this story, we get the first appearance of Joker at Arkham, where he's been taken for the first time after getting off as not a traditional criminal. And Gordon is basically trying to choose between helping Harvey Dent, spending the day with his family, and just sitting there guarding the Joker. And he ends up guarding the Joker and basically pleasing no one. And all things told, it was a pretty solid story. Nothing necessarily groundbreaking, but for a filler issue, it felt pretty good. As far as the backup goes, we are continuing with the Punchline story here, which continues to be a highlight of this for me. It was kind of a little bit lighter on story this time. Really just Harper Row kind of figures out that Punchline is sort of taken over the women's part of the prison and is as much a cult of personality there as she was on the outside. The big regret for me with this is that this just isn't an ongoing series. I feel like we just take such small incremental jumps from issue to issue that I wish we could just really dig in. That one shot was so satisfying because you really got to spend more time with the character, whereas here it's just a few pages doled out every month. I don't think it's quite doing justice to the potential of the Punchline story, but we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully it expands out into a full series at some point, and we'll have to see what happens to this Joker book in the long run after Tinian leaves. Okay, so as we get into the last few books of the month, of which there were so many, the last few are always among my highlights, always excited to read them. And in a month with so many books, how do these last few fare? So we've got next up Legends of the Dark Knight, which was a great read the first couple months and continues to be a lot of fun this time. I particularly enjoyed Quiz and her relationship with the Riddler and how that dynamic kind of played out. Riddler in some ways is like one of my favorite Batman villains because you can just take him in so many different directions, because he's never quite been nailed down. Like in the Jeff Loeb era, you know, he was like a washout, and then in Hush, he kind of came back and was kind of the maniacal villain. In this, he has this weird relationship where he's getting pushed around by this fangirl, Quiz. In Scott Snyder, he's a lot more menacing. Obviously, there's Frank Gorshin and like Jim Carrey School of Riddler, where he's completely over the top. This one finds just another great dynamic. You just never know what you're going to get with him, and so that's kind of why I enjoy him. As far as the story goes, it was a satisfying conclusion. You get a little bit more time with Batman and Alfred in here. Pretty great artwork throughout. And all in all, a good conclusion. I'm sad that this is ending and we're moving on to another team. I'm not sure who's next. I haven't paid close attention, but I will be excited to see how they do. They've got quite a bit to live up to with Legends of the Dark Knight. Penultimate issue I read this week is Nightwing. Always a highlight as well. And this one, very solid issue. We get the secret history of Melinda Zucco and how this all fits together. Quite a bit of retconning going on here. There is a guest artist, by the way. So Rick Leonardi, who had a pretty good run when he was doing Batgirl back in the day, which I have some reviews for, does all the flashback stuff in this, which is the majority of the issue, where we see how Melinda Zucco fits into the story of Haley's Circus, and Tony Zucco, actually, there was more behind him shaking them down for protection money than was let on. He had a personal vendetta against Haley's Circus because his wife, his captive wife, basically was taken in by the circus and helped her escape his clutches. Interesting developments all around. I'm excited for Melinda Zucco to see where this is going. And we wrap up with a little bit of blockbuster coming in at the end as we get back into the present day. So pretty compelling. I think, if anything, you know, it's great to get the secret history of Melinda Zucco. I almost don't care that much. Like, it's one of those, it's so out of left field that you have to explain it, but at the same time, it's like, I don't even really need to know. Like, you could just roll with it because it's so random. It's like typical comic book randomness where like, it's a fun soap opera development, so you got to have the explanation, but I'm more interested in the consequences of introducing that character than I am explaining why this character exists and how she ended up where she is. So excited for coming issues. This issue, decent overall, but if you're someone who's, you know, super obsessed with Nightwing continuity and want to know how she fits into the puzzle, this is going to be an important issue for you. Finally, a book that is often in my top reads is Robin. I was pretty excited where we left off. We had the reintroduction of Ra's al Ghul, and we get basically a whole bunch of time with him. And I gotta say, this issue for me was kind of a bust, mostly because of the portrayal of Ra's al Ghul as like a hippie pirate. It just, I don't know, it was really weird. It didn't really work for me, in all honesty. So, I mean, if you want a different take on Ra's al Ghul, like, I mean, I was just saying with Legends of the Dark Knight that, you know, I like that Riddler can kind of go in a lot of different directions. I just don't know that Ra's al Ghul is one that can do that. But they certainly go for it here. You know, props for trying. But, I mean, he's like Captain Morgan, and that, it just was really odd to me. So, not my favorite issue overall. I mean, come on. A lot of the issues this week kind of took a moment to slow down and give you some character and give you, you know, some background before really moving forward with the story writ large. This is another one like that. Nightwing was one like that. So yeah, I'm still excited about this book. I'm excited to see where we're going next. Spoilers at the end, we get all the Robins reunited, much to Damian's dismay. And I'm sure next issue there's going to be a cheesy throwdown with all the Robins, which will be kind of fun. So excited for that, even though it's a little bit derivative. Excited to get back to Lazarus Island and focus in on what's happening there because the tournament is about to begin. This issue, just in and of itself, I don't know. I don't want to say you could skip it, but I'm not sure you really needed it. And if you want to see this weird version of Ra's al Ghul, it's worth it. But other than that, I'm pretty meh on this one. So kind of a lackluster finish to this month's issues of Batman. Too bad. So as I said before, so many Batman books this month. I've heard October and November it's going to actually ramp up, and there's going to be like 50 Batman books in like November or something insane like that. As Fear State ramps up, as some of these new miniseries ramp up, I just don't know what I'm going to do in terms of reviewing, so more on that to come, I guess. But I would like to continue reviewing everything they're putting out that's new, because I've been having a lot of fun reading it. It just may hit a point where, it's just a critical mass. I just can't read. I can't read 50 Batman books in a month. It's just the reality of it. I just don't have time. Even if I wanted to, which I really probably don't. But obviously we're not here to listen to me complain. We're here to talk about what were the best Batman books for July. This was a tough one for me, actually, because it took me a long time to get through all these books, which is why this video is so late. I just was busy with other things. And as a result, some of the books I read early on aren't sticking with me quite as much. There really weren't that many books that blew me away from a story perspective overall, as I'm looking back. Like, there were a couple standouts, but for the most part, like, very few kind of left me really craving that next issue. Being completely unable to wait for next month's books. For the most part, I got a lot of enjoyment out of how Batman is written in some of these books, and just relishing in the atmosphere. That's where the majority of my enjoyment came from as I was reading books this month. So with all of that said, I'm going to pick out 4 books, my top 3 and my runner-up. For my runner-up, first off, I'm going to give it to Batman Reptilian. So, I really enjoyed the first month's issue of Batman Reptilian. I really enjoyed this issue as well. If anything, the thing that holds us back from being one of my top 3 is, I love the atmosphere, I love the art, I love the way Batman was written in this. The story is, for me, the story is just a framework for absorbing the atmosphere of it. Like, nothing from a story perspective really jumped out to me in this, and in my mind it's just a little bit shallow on that front. Now, that's not even necessarily a bad thing, but it is going to yield it to the top 3 books that I felt like hit on all cylinders, more so than this one did this month. Next up, my number 3 pick, I'm gonna go with Urban Legends, I think. So last month, I think this was my pick of the month, after being towards the bottom of the pile for me. And, it's really come a long way just because those main stories have been great. The unfortunate reality of Batman Urban Legends is month to month, some days it's going to be great, sometimes it's just going to be like a waste of your time. But this one overall was really, really good. The reason it's my number 3 and not higher is because the supporting stories with Tim Drake and the Batgirls were pretty underwhelming for me. But it does still make the top 3 just based on the conclusion of the Grifter storyline. The introduction of Wildcats was one of the top 2 moments of the month for me. And then the Red Hood story, as it's reaching its penultimate issue with this, left me really excited to see how they're going to wrap things up, because I found myself just really, really enjoying that storyline. And it really sold me after the first few issues where I was just kind of like, it just didn't do that much for me. And now it's like a storyline I just can't wait to read more. So Batman Urban Legends is my number 3 pick of the week. Definitely recommend checking it out. Penultimate issue is going to go to Legends of the Dark Knight. I just really enjoyed the dynamic between Quiz, Batman, and the Riddler in this. It made for some laughs, it had some dark humor. The art overall was really, really great, although there were a couple points early in the issue where the way Batman was illustrated came off, at least to me, a little bit doofy. But that's okay, it worked overall. And as you got further and further into the story, there were just some great panels with Batman, Scarecrow, Riddler, just so much great stuff. And of course you get Alfred back for his little moment, showing that this is either something that took place in the past or is Elseworlds or whatever. However this book is being addressed, I haven't paid that close of attention. But regardless, great moment with Alfred, great book overall, can't recommend it highly enough. And then last but not least, what is the pick of the week? Or pick of the month, I should say. It's going to be Catwoman. Absolutely love this. I really enjoyed the throwdown between Catwoman and Father Valley, and it left things off on a great cliffhanger. Definitely the most excited I was at the end of a book this month, where Batman was reintroduced with Catwoman, and we get to see a bit of a reconciliation there after quite a while apart in all reality. So, really excited about this book, really enjoying it. I missed out on not having as much Riddler in this book, after they kind of set up having him and Poison Ivy around, but I know they'll come back around to it. The ragtag team of villains they did introduce in this were fun, and I recommend checking it out. So Catwoman, absolutely a pickup. It's a pickup every single month. You gotta start reading it. It's so much fun. Looking forward to next month. I've already got a big old pile of books that I gotta get through, and can't wait to share my thoughts with you on those. So have a good one. Thanks for your patience. Sorry for the lateness of this video. Have a good one.